Christy. Welcome back to my channel and welcome to day 4 of my 2024 holiday card series. Today I'm going to be making 2 cards using the Mama Elephant Cheer. So I've stamped those images out on Spectrum Noir Ultra Smooth Premium White cardstock with Lawn Fawn Jet Black ink. And I'm going to be coloring to match some pattern paper from the Simple Stories Santa's Village 6x8 pad. So I'm going to tear a sheet out to use as my color inspiration and tuck that under my cardstock panel. And since I'm going to be coloring elephants, I'm going to refer back to a little coloring chart that I've created coloring elephants with different combinations so that I can choose one for this video. And that is a video that you can find on my channel if you're interested in that. So I decided to go with the elephants in the warm gray tones. So I pulled out W00, W1, W3 and W5, and I'm going to start laying in my shadows on these elephants with that W5. So I'm starting at the top of the head and placing a little bit of shadow there under the little mouse as well, down the back of the ear and a little bit under the flap of the ear where that would be casting a shadow on the neck and hindquarters, down the hindquarters and on the back of the legs, and then also a little bit of shadow at the front of the trunk where it is connected to the body to give that a bit of definition. And since I am coloring all of these and they're fairly small images, I'm just going to do all of the shadows at once. That way I don't have to go back and forth between markers. So I'm just going to use the W5 while I've got that out for all of them. And the only variation that I'm doing is I do like to switch my shadows depending on the direction that they're facing. I like to keep my faces nice and light on my critters or my kiddos, whatever it is that I'm coloring. So I tend to put my shadows on the back of the body and keep the highlight on the face. That way you're really able to distinguish those adorable facial features that make these critters or kiddos so cute. So if they are facing toward the right hand side, the shadows are going to fall on the left, and if they're facing toward the left, the shadows are going to fall on the right. And I didn't realize it at the moment, but I actually missed a little bit of the forehead of this little elephant that I'm working on now. There's a sliver of space between that string of lights and the bottom of the lid of the gift box that I just didn't see in this initial coloring, but I went back and colored that in later with the W3 and the W5. I'm just moving on now and blending out that W5 with the W3, pulling that color out even further. And then I am filling in a lot of the elephants with the W1. I am keeping a little bit of area on the face for some extra highlight, also on some of the trunks, especially the ones that are more uplifted, and on some of the front legs if they are kind of extended out a little bit as well. And then I am throwing a little bit of that W1 into the inner ear. Then I'll come in with that final shade, the W00, and I'll fill in that extra bit of highlight around the face and also fill in the inner ears or the bottom of the feet for that elephant that's on the top row. I wanted that to be a little bit of a lighter shade as well. So I let those elephants dry for about 30 seconds to a minute, and then I went back in with my W5 and added a little bit of dot detail just to give them some extra interest, give them a little texture to their skin. This is going to fade a little bit as these inks dry back, so it won't be quite so prominent, but it just gives them a little bit of extra personality and kind of distinguishes them a bit from each other. It's an extra step that I don't always do, but I do think it is a cute one. And I did also throw in just a couple of dots with the W3 so that there would be some softer ones there as well. Then I'm going to move on to my mice, and I decided to go with brown mice just so they would contrast enough with those elephants since they are quite small. So I brought in E51, E53, and E55 for them. I love the addition of those mice. I love tiny images, and I think they just bring so much character to this stamp set. So I used the E55 for the darkest, blended out with the E53, and then used a little E51 for the highlight. And then I, of course, have to give everybody some rosy cheeks. I'm going to use RV10 and RV11 for today, using a little RV11 to add an oval shape to the cheek area. And then I'm going to blend out around that with the RV10 for the elephants. For the mice, I just used the RV11 because it's such a small little area and it didn't really need to be blended out. And I also added a little bit of that to their inner ears. For the elephant's inner ears, I used both shades. So there is actually a bit of pink in this pattern paper. In those little flower clusters, there are sprigs of tiny berries, and those berries are pink. So I wanted to bring that into my color palette. So I kept the RV10 and RV11 and then added in the RV13. And I'm just going to start coloring in some of these accessory images. I'm going to do some of the stars, just picking some here and there. I'll also do some of the gift boxes or the ribbons. I'll do the little heart that is in the elephant in the center of the bottom row. I'll do a few of the lights on the string of lights and the star on one of the ornaments, just kind of hopping around and choosing different items to color in that are going to spread this pink around the scene. So once I have the RV13 laid in, I'll blend out with the RV11 and then fill in with the RV10. And I just have both caps of my RV13 off because that marker tends to leak on me. Before I get any further, I wanted to tackle these Christmas trees. So I'm going to use G20, G21, G24, and G28 for those. This was the closest green that I could get to the little pine boughs that are mixed in with those flowers. So I'm starting with the G28 at the top of each of the tiers of the Christmas trees. And as I mentioned at the beginning, I am creating 2 cards today, which is why I have 2 Christmas trees. And then I have 2 elephants will be on one card and the other 2 will be on the second card. So I am blending out the G28 with the G24. Just pulling the edge of that G28 down, going right over top of that with the G24 and kind of scribbling a little bit back and forth over the edge to eliminate any harsh lines that might be left behind by that darker shade. And then whatever I do to the first Christmas tree, I'm just going to repeat on the second one. You definitely could get away with only using 3 shades on these Christmas trees, but since they are larger images, I like to use 4, and also there is a big gap between the G28 and the G24, and there is also a large gap between the G24 and the G20. So adding that G21 into the mix, even though it is very similar to the G24, still just helps transition it a little bit better into that G20. And you could skip the G20 and just use the darkest 3 shades, but I love adding that G20 in there. It's so light and bright. It has a little bit of a yellow cast to it, and I just think it really adds a lot of life to this combo. So I like having the really dark shade with the G28 to give it that depth, and then having that really, really pale kind of yellowish green with the G20 to just soften up those edges and just make it look kind of lit up. I just really love the variation between the different 4 shades here. So I'm going to use that G20 down at the bottom, and as I did before, I'm just going to kind of scribble over the edge of that G21 and just make sure that these shades are really blending well together. The last thing I want is for it to have like dark lines between each of the transitions. So just making sure to really go over that and smooth it out nicely. And then I will just do a few little dots on the trees as well to give them some texture, just to tie in with the elephants. I just thought that would be a fun touch. So I did that with the G28, and then I did just a few with the G24 as well. And I usually like to put my dots in the more deeply shadows areas. I just think it stands out a bit better there. I will also do a few of the accessory images in green. I'm not going to do a ton of them though, because we already do have the large Christmas trees that are going to be front and center on the cards. But since my color palette is quite limited, aside from the neutrals, it's just pink, red, green, and aqua. So if I hadn't done some of the accessory images in green, I just felt like there wasn't enough of a color palette to really work with. So I decided to do just a few things in the green combo, and I like having that little bit of an echo throughout the color palette anyway, tying in those trees to these other little images. Then I'm going to switch to red and represent the flowers in that pattern paper. And I'm going to use R22, R24, and R29. I'm going to do the Santa hats on my mice or elephants, whichever the case may be. I'm going to do the large bow on the gift that the elephant in the center is inside. I'm going to do the top and bottom stripes of one of the ornaments, and then I'll do a few of the stars. I kind of mixed it up on the tree and did opposite with the pink and the red for the stars, but then the bottom one isn't going to end up being the same, but that's okay. These cards are not going to go to the same person, so nobody else is ever going to see them side by side except for you guys. But yeah, I just really felt like I needed to get going on my Christmas cards. I feel like I'm running behind this year. I don't have nearly enough made yet, and I know that time passes so quickly during the holidays, so I just wanted to really push and try to do more cards if I can, and so that's why I decided to do 2 at once for today's video. But on all of these red items, I just started with the R29, blended out with the R24, and then I'm finishing with the R22. And I did quite a few of these accessory images in red because I just think it's such a beautiful pop of color for the holidays, and it's so festive. So my last combo is going to be aqua, and I'm using BG10, BG11, and BG13. So I'm going to go around and do a few of these little stars. I'm going to do the ornament with the star on it in the center. I am going to do the stars on the Christmas trees, but not the ones at the top. I'm going to do a slight variation. We'll get to that in a second. I'm going to blend out the BG13 with the BG11 and then use the BG10 for a highlight. And then because I didn't want to go too dark with the aqua, I decided to do just the lighter 2 shades for anything that I wanted to look white. So I'm using just the BG10 and BG11 for the white parts of my Santa hat, for the kind of drippy top of the ornament there on the center elephant. I did it for the gift wrap on his box, and also for the 2 stars on top of the tree and the little star in the mouse's hand. And then I'm going to just blend that out with the BG quadruple 0 just to make that a little bit lighter, so there's enough variation between those 2 aqua tones. I used just the BG13 to finish off the lights on my string, And then I'm actually going to go back to the browns that I used for my mice to do the bottom of this ornament because it reminded me of like figgy pudding or sticky toffee pudding. I don't really know what the difference is, but I did try sticky toffee pudding in London this fall and it was amazing. And then I used W3 for the tops of the ornaments, and then I'll go over the eyes of my critters with a black Sakura Jelly Roll pen, and I did get a new one, and it is working so much better than the old one. I don't know why I struggled with that one for so long. I'm going to trim these images out with their matching dies. So now I'm going to go back to this paper pad, the Simple Stories Santa's Village, and I'm going to choose 2 more prints to go along with the one that I used as my inspiration. And I kept going back and forth between these greens. I definitely wanted to go with green to bring out the little pine boughs, but I could not decide which one I wanted to use. But eventually I did decide to go with the tiny scattered polka dot because it just brought in more of the colors from the little accessory images that I had used. So that's what I am going to go with for these 2 cards. I am going to stamp both of my sentiments at the same time using VersaFine Onyx Black ink, and I'm just stamping those onto a scrap piece of white cardstock, which I'm going to trim down in a little bit. The top one says, "Wishing you a trunk load of happiness," and the bottom one says, "Sending elephant-sized holiday cheer your way." I love a good pun, so these are right up my alley. I stamped those down twice to make sure they were nice and bold, and then I'll set those aside to dry and pop my card base in my MISTI. I am using ballet slippers from Lawn Fawn for both card bases and stamping on the inside in bubblegum ink. And I'm going to stamp a different elephant on the inside and pick one of those sentiments to use, and I did not clean off that little elephant stamp first, which I should have done because it didn't stamp clearly, so I did that. I'm going to show you the second one at the end of the video just because I didn't want to take too long, but I did stamp a different message and a different elephant on the inside. So now I'm ready to start assembling, and I'm going to take the candy cane striped paper and adhere that to the front of one of the cards. And that card was a little bit long, so I'm going to take that to my paper trimmer and just trim off the excess before I continue. But first I will add the other polka dotted paper to the second card, and that's going to cover the entire card front. So now I've trimmed off that excess, and I am going to swap the pattern papers. So the polka dot is going to go over the center of the candy cane stripe, and then the candy cane stripe will go over the center of the polka dot, just to have a little bit more variation between those two, but I still ended up using only the 3 pieces of pattern paper for both cards. So I'll set those aside, and now I'm going to work on my focal panels. So the inspiration piece that we used, I've trimmed down into 2 smaller panels, and I'm going to glue some Lawn Fawn wood grain cardstock in the light brown shade over top, and that is going to be my floor. And my glue got a little clog in it, so I had to just use the pin to release that before I could continue on. And I will do the same thing with the second one. The focal panels are going to be identical except for the stamped images that I'm going to place over top and also the sentiment. Then I took the Mama Elephant Flirty Scalloped Frames. I took the larger of the 2 dies and I trimmed that out of some MFT snow cone cardstock, and then added some foam tape to the back of that, and then peeled off the release papers, and I am going to line those up over top and just pop those down into place. And I didn't get the first one on there straight, so I had to pull that back up and just fix it quickly. And then I am going to do the same thing with the second one. And I really loved how that snow cone cardstock matched that pattern paper. It's just a little bit lighter, which I really liked because it just gave it a little bit of extra interest. And then once I have those assembled, I am going to glue those to my 2 card fronts. So again, I'll just add some liquid glue to the back using my Barely Art Precision Craft Glue. And it's still got a little clog in there, so I think I'm going to have to take that over to the sink and rinse out the inner top piece with a little bit of warm water. That usually fixes things, although it worked much better on the second one, so maybe I got it out on that first one. But anyway, I'm just going to glue those to the centers of the cards so we have a little bit of that cardstock peeking through around the outside edges, and then I'll bring in my sentiments. So I am popping those up with foam tape down toward the bottom of the floor part of my scene. And I just trim those down with the second largest of the Lawn Fawn Everyday Sentiment banners. That was a pretty good fit, and then I just sized the edges to match the length of the sentiment. So I just ran that through my die cutting machine twice and just did one end for each pass. And then I'm going to add my Christmas trees right above that in the center of the scene. And again, I'm popping up all of my images with some foam tape as well, just to create a nice bit of dimension on these cards. Then I'll take one of the elephants. This is the one that is in the gift, and I'll add that to the first card over on the right. And then to match that, I'm going to add the elephant with the trio of gifts in his trunk or on his trunk over on the left. And I think that looks super cute. And then on card number 2, I'm going to take the elephant that has the star in his trunk and add that on the left. And then the little elephant and the pile of stars are going to go on the right, since that elephant is a little bit smaller of an image. And I just tore off a little bit of his foam tape because he needed to be able to overlap that pile of stars. I wanted it to look like he was kind of reaching behind him into that pile and adding them to the Christmas tree. And then, of course, I added a little bit of glitter with some Stardust Stickles, my favorite embellishment that I use on almost every card. For the card on the right, I added it to all of the stars. And for the card on the left, I added it to the stars, the ribbons on the gifts that are in the elephant's trunk, and then to the ornaments and the string of lights that are in the second elephant, and also the little heart. So I will lift each of these cards up to the camera so you can see them in a little bit more detail. I did the opposite sentiment on the inside of the cards, and then I also used a different elephant on the inside. There are 6 elephants in the stamp set, so I had 2 extra, one to use in each card. I really love how these turned out, and I hope that you guys enjoy them too. If you did, please be sure to hit that like button and leave me a comment down below. I'd love to hear from you. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and ring that notification bell if you want to be alerted when I post new videos. All of the products I use will be listed and linked in the description bar below the video in case you'd like to pick up anything for yourself. And if you'd like to keep watching, here is day 4 of the previous 2 years of holiday card series. You can click on either one to check them out. Thank you so much for spending your time with me today. I hope you had a good one, and I will see you soon in another video. Bye-bye.